top of my head. He's wearing all red, has a red hat on, and they actually somehow ended up very conveniently in the room with Ashli Babbitt right as she was being shot, right around Ashli Babbitt as this took place. And they were on, just like Ray Epps, they were put on the FBI wanted list and then almost immediately taken off right after. But you never hear about any of them.
You know what's going on?
One could ask that, and they probably should, but it's inconvenient to the narrative. And even if you do ask, I mean, we've seen with what Ray Epps has accomplished. I mean, he's literally on video on January 5th multiple times telling people to go into the Capitol on multiple occasions, and then on January 6th doing the exact same thing. I mean, there's even a video of him holding a big Trump banner and actually pushing it into police alongside other people. But, you know, he's Adam Kinzinger's and the committee's absolute darling, and they don't want to talk about him. They release the transcripts, and it literally says that, hey, I helped organize this, and he's on video doing so. But you're not allowed to talk about it, and if you do, you're labeled a conspiracy theorist.
You see there's transcripts of Ray Epps saying that he helped organize January 6th?
Yeah, I believe, I don't know which congressman that actually released it originally, but I mean, it's literally in the transcripts that he is talking, I believe it's to his son. I'm not 100% sure on it, but I think he organized it. I mean, he was one of the organizers.
He said he orchestrated it.
He is the person that I followed to the Capitol while Trump was speaking. We arrived at the Capitol. I followed Ray Epps' group. I thought it was suspicious. He basically started rallying people and saying, hey, 10 minutes, we're going to the Capitol. We're going to the Capitol. And I'm sitting there like, okay, this is really weird. Trump supporters going to the Capitol on Trump's very last speech of the year, his last speech of his presidency, the Save America speech, is suspicious. And, you know, I followed them. Then the first barrier goes down. The second barrier goes down, which that's the famous video of Ray Epps, you know, whispering into Ryan Samsel's ear, and then the barrier goes down conveniently. You know, so I was literally alongside Ray Epps. He is the one that led the first initial group on that west side and breached those two barriers. And then something that isn't talked about is after those first two barriers were breached, you had about 6 officers responsible for stopping hundreds of thousands of people. And there was the initial, like, you know, I would call it the riot zone, or it was where they hold the inauguration every year. And the crowd of thousands of people just started to form. I mean, there's mothers, there's children, people from all walks of life. Everyone's just standing there. I was already deep in the crowd, and it was peaceful for about 20 to 30 minutes. And then a concussion grenade flies over my head and explodes into the crowd. And then it just started to erupt. So it was a police riot, I would say.
So let me pull this tweet. I want to pull this tweet real quick. We've got this from Colin Rugg. He says, Matt Gaetz says Republicans will release 14,000 hours of January 6 tapes that were hidden by Democrats. Gaetz for the win once again. What could be on these tapes, and do you think it's going to happen?
I think it has a potential of happening, but I'm not super positive just because of everything that was supposed to come out hasn't come out. You know, I actually talked to Gaetz in a Twitter space last night. I asked him about the same thing, and, you know, he was very positive about it. He seemed, you know, basically assured that these were going to be released. I mean, I've seen a good majority of this footage that's been unreleased. I wish I could talk about it more, but I can't. But I mean, they've deleted footage. They've scrubbed through this. So I mean, even what you're going to see if they do release this 14,000 hours of footage, they're not going to actually release all of it. They've deleted some of it. I mean, they've said in public statements that there was no video camera in the hallway where Ashli Babbitt was shot. There was multiple video cameras. I saw them myself. Multiple congressmen can attest to actually seeing the video cameras. They're there right now outside the speaker's lobby. But they don't want to release the other angles of Ashli Babbitt being shot because it shows Michael Byrd cowardly hiding directly behind the barrier, not issuing a verbal warning, not doing anything, and then stepping forward and essentially executing Ashli Babbitt.
Wow. What happened? She climbed up on a piece of furniture or something to get through a window, and they just thought she was attacking them? And
well, so what happened is you had multiple officers standing, basically guarding those doors. And me and Ashli were the very first ones to get into that room. And I actually, you know, I offered Officer Yetter, that was his name, a water bottle because he was covered in capsaicin powder. And, you know, they said, no, you know, it's fine. And Ashli Babbitt was literally joking with the same officers that moved out of the way of the barrier, you know, minutes prior to her being shot. And that's the side of the story you never hear. But these cops, the CERT team, which Michael Byrd claims wasn't there, that's the reason why he shot Ashli Babbitt, they were there. They were walking up the stairs. And for those of people that don't know about the CERT team, it's basically the tactical team for the Capitol.
You can see it on video.
Yeah, you can see it on video. And that's, you know, where people, like, see the thumbs up is because they didn't realize when Michael Byrd stepped forward and shot, they didn't realize if it was a friendly or not that had fired that shot because it was so unexpected. I mean, the CERT team was in the room with Babbitt and everyone else, and you actually, right before she is shot and killed and goes to the window, she grabs Zachary Alam with her right hand and punches him in the face, knocking his glasses off. And Zachary Alam was the one that was responsible for breaking all the barriers up. So she goes through the window, basically in order to try and stop the crowd. I mean, she was on camera and on audio basically yelling at these officers to do their job multiple times. And then they didn't do their job. They shifted over. CERT team comes to replace, and now the windows are completely exposed.
So they think, people are saying she was going to get up and turn around and yell at the crowd like, hey, cut it out kind of thing.
You gotta think though. I mean, she's 14-year Air Force veteran. She's been on multiple combat deployments. She knows what the rules of engagement are, right? And is it easier to stop an angry crowd or at least a few angry people within the crowd when you're on the same side of the barrier with her, or when you're on the opposite side of the barrier? And logic says on the opposite side of the barrier, you can push people out the window, you can stand there, you can guard the window, or you can at least grab that window pane that's exposed and pull it back in.
Have they filed a wrongful death suit?
I'm not sure if it's been officially filed, but I do know something is in the process.
And it's also important to know that that officer was acting extremely reckless to shoot an unarmed woman in the neck or in the face.
It was in the left anterior shoulder.
With police officers behind her,
Yep.
and her not
Directly
being
in the line
a
of
threat
fire.
or not being armed is absolutely something that should have been national headline news. There should have been some larger accountability here, but this officer was investigated and not even held accountable for his crimes. Meanwhile, this was the same officer that left a firearm in a public bathroom before.
Yeah, in 2018, he left his loaded Glock in a public bathroom, and a civilian found it in the Capitol. And then, his quote is actually hilarious. He was a lieutenant at the time. He said, "I will not be punished." He says, "I will be treated differently because of my rank as lieutenant." So, I mean, if he actually was deranked or actually punished with how he was supposed to be in a proper law enforcement scenario, he wouldn't have been there to shoot Ashli Babbitt. I mean, it would have been somebody that was leading the house security other than Michael Burt.
I'm just thinking about. I mean, you were there, right? And you're a reporter. You're covering what's going on. How close were you? I mean, were you in danger?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not from the direct round. I mean, I was closest to Michael Burt out of anybody. I mean, that's where you get like the hoax of where, he's on video giving her a verbal warning, but he didn't give her a single verbal warning before he stepped forward and shot her. Most people didn't even realize that he was there. It was so loud in that room because you had a crowd surge coming in from behind and just overfilling. And, I mean, you had John Sullivan, which we all know about John Sullivan. He was right next to me. He has the angle of him actually shooting Ashli, and my angle is of Ashli falling out the window. And, he's screaming, hey, he's got a gun, because he's the only one that can see Michael Burt. And so I remember I started screaming it, but you literally can't hear from me to you. And the distance between me and Ashli was about, I mean, for me and Serge, 10, 15 feet. And that's when, I mean, she went up. Nobody even realized that there was a gun there, and he stepped forward and executed her.
That's absolutely just, crazy, insane.
Yeah, I never, in all my years reporting, I mean, I covered the 2020 riots. I've seen some pretty crazy things. The feet on fire, Molotov clips, all of those kinds of things.
We were there.
I mean, in Portland, Night 100.
There was also that one in during the DNC in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think Mike Chernovich was down there too. Yeah, and we saw some
fire.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some really crazy things on the ground, but I mean, I've never seen, nothing will ever compare to what I experienced on January 6th. And of course, it still lives with me, seeing an innocent woman basically get murdered by the government in front of me. And then I remember that night really just, I mean, I was in shock. I remember stumbling out of the Capitol, not really understanding what took place. I went to the hotel. They basically did a little mini martial law. You couldn't even leave your hotel afterwards. And, I was lucky enough to stay with some of the InfoWars guys. They brought me in because my hotel was on the opposite side of the entire town, and you couldn't even walk outside. And I remember watching the TV, and, I had licensed my footage, but I didn't feel right about making an actual profit off it. I gave it to these news sources for like $2 a clip. And then you got John Sullivan selling it for $85,000, which is absolutely absurd. So, yeah, he got criminally charged, but then now he's perfectly fine living in Utah.
They dropped the charges or what?
I'm pretty sure they dropped the charges. I'm not 100% sure, but it's suspicious around him. The FBI reached out to me after the shooting, and the only thing they wanted to talk about, they didn't want to talk about literally anything else other than John Sullivan. So that kind of puts it in perspective. They wanted to talk about their little patsy toy. But the night of, I just watched on the news. They're using my footage and spinning a completely different story on what happened. They didn't talk about how Ashli was trying to de-escalate. Instead, she was called a violent terrorist and insurrectionist. So that's kind of when it set in for me of like, I'm in the middle of a cover-up.
As Ray Epps is on camera on January 5th saying we're going to storm the Capitol, and on January 5th, and then people calling him a Fed. People were screaming Fed, 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 and then he did the same thing the next day.
Yep, he did the same thing multiple times and is on camera multiple times on the 6th, organizing people at different points saying we're going into the Capitol.
And this is a man that still has not been punished or even brought in for questioning. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, he was brought in for questioning by the January 6th committee, which is convenient because the committee, I literally begged them to tell my story. I wanted to tell my story to them. Reached out on multiple accounts. None of them wanted to talk to me. They refused, which now we know why. I mean, I saw something I wasn't supposed to see on multiple occasions. But, I mean, then you got Ray Epps, and he is basically being paraded around as the darling of the day by Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney saying, oh, no, he did nothing wrong, even though he is on video arguably doing more than almost everybody that's actually been prosecuted and is sitting in a cell right
That's
now.
crazy. But the Ray Epps thing is the most agreed. Like, it's the one where I hear about it. I'm like, oh, I hear this guy Ray Epps, and then you see the video of him, and you hear his voice saying, "Let's go do this now."
Mm-hmm.
Like, and he's telling people, how is that guy not in some sort
incitement.
of detention at the moment?
Yeah,
or
it's incitement.
like that. That's the
He orchestrated it.
Yep. I mean,